My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
This episode is brought to you by Jira. Ever wonder how those big marketing campaigns that make headlines get delivered on time? It all starts with Jira, the only project management tool you need to plan and track work across any team. Every step of that campaign is organised in one place, from launching the campaign all the way back to designing ads and writing creative briefs. Get started on your next big marketing campaign idea today in Jira.
1, 2, 3, 4. Monster movie.
Fun time, go! Monster movie.
Fun time, go. Monster
Movie.
Fun time,
Go!
Monster movie. Fun time, go.
With Precious D and Honeybee.
Fun time, go!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends and neighbors, welcome once again to my annual exercise in masochism, 31 Days of Horror, which I think this year I'm calling 31 Days of the Dead, because our theme this year is zombies. 31 Days of the Dead. Day 1. To kick things off, I have a very special guest, my old buddy and yours, John Hambone McGuire. Welcome back to the show, John.
Thank you so much for having me. I was stoked when you hit me up the other day, asked me to come back on, and I was even more stoked when you asked me to come on and talk about zombies. So hell to the yeah.
So the movie we're going to talk about is Return of the Living Dead. But before we get into that, John is the co-host of the Vintage RPG podcast and the co-founder of 321 Action Games, a role-playing game company. And John has a new game that just came out called Zombie Brain Eaters: Suburban Decay in the USA. So before we get into the movie, John, tell us a little bit about your new game.
So it is a game that I produced with Brian Shutter, the Neon Lord from Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland. I had an idea for a zombie game for a while, and he had an idea for a dice mechanic for a while. We were down in Maryland together at work. We were actually both at a convention called Game Face. We're next to each other shooting the breeze. And I was like, hey, I have this idea that doesn't really work with action. And he's like, I have this dice idea that doesn't really work with kind of what I'm doing. And then that was in March. And between March and now, which is when we're recording this, second week of September, the book is out already. It's done. It's in the can. And it is zombie survival horror. Whoever you show up to the dance with is probably not going to be who you're going to leave with. It is a crucible where you're trying to make your way from, and it's an open world game. We give you an adventure with 3 specific, like, hey, you can do this, and this, and this, but you could put it in any town USA, and you're trying to get to a place where there's a potential cure, but you have to escape your neighborhood first.
Yeah, I ran it the other day with a couple of my players. Well, we had 2 players the first session, and then a third one joined us the second session, which it's a perfect game for that, because any survivor can just kind of jump in at any time. You don't have to come up with some elaborate backstory of why this new character is there.
Yeah.
And I think we only had 2 character casualties. I did let them play it on easy mode with the most starting hit points. Them blew himself up to, he was getting swarmed by zombies. So to save the other guy, he ignited the can of gasoline that he had with him and something else explosive. I can't remember what it was.
I mean, it ain't just the way.
Yeah. But then his next character was very ready to start shooting other people who had been bitten. He wanted to just take out other player characters who had been bitten and head off that progression into zombiehood.
Yeah, I mean, there is theoretically a cure, though, waiting for you at the end of the game. I mean, you have to roll on a chart, to see if it works or
Right.
what happens if it works but kind of doesn't work. But yeah, I mean, it runs off a D12, a D10, a D8, and a D6. And once you have to roll, essentially the system that we run it for is called 5 Alive RPG. You have to roll a 5 to succeed. There's no stats. You got to roll a 5 or better, roll a 5 to stay alive. Everything automatically hits. You're just rolling your damage. So anything over 5 that you roll on the violence modifier of your weapon, that's the damage you're going to do. But if a zombie bites you, you lose a dice, which is going to make it harder for you to do the things that you need to do to try to survive to the end of the game. So it does become a little bit complicated. There's a lot of Easter eggs in the game as well, and a lot of things that, it's a personal game to me because the neighborhood that you're escaping from is my childhood neighborhood. So one of the house drawings in there is actually my childhood home. You're escaping from a block above where I grew up. And then it's a pretty fun game, and we have other ideas for more adventures, different types of adventures with it. And I was literally waiting for the books to arrive today to ship them out to people. Then I got a UPS alert being like, fooled you. We rescheduled it.
Hate it when that happens.
Yeah.
Well, it was a lot of fun. I recommend it. What's the website for that if people want to?
If you want, you can get it off of braineatersrpg.com. It takes you to the Etsy. Right now, by the time this episode drops, it will be ready to ship out within a day. So it's good to go. And Brian and I are already working on a fantasy version of it that I can't really talk too much more about. But who knows, by the time this episode airs, we might be announcing it. So
Great. Well, let's get into this movie, which I figured you were going to choose when I gave you a list of zombie movies.
Oh, yeah.
Based on the name of the game. Because Return of the Living Dead is the movie where the whole concept of zombies craving brains comes from. Let's do a few quick stats here. It is from 1985. It's 91 minutes in color. Directed by Dan O'Bannon, screenplay by Dan O'Bannon, story by Rudy Ricci, John Russo, and Russell Steiner. The budget was $3 to $4 million, and the box office was $14.2 million. So that's not too shabby.
Especially in 80s money,
Yeah. Our cast is Clu Gulager as Bert Wilson, James Karen as Frank Johnson, Don Kalfa as Ernie Clattenbrunner, Tom Matthews as Freddie Hanscom, Beverly Randolph as Tina, Miguel A. Nunez Jr. as Spider, John Philbin as Chuck, Jewel Shepard as Casey, Brian Peck as Scuzz, Linnea Quigley as Trash, Mark Venturini as Suicide, Jonathan Terry as Colonel Glover. And those are all the main cast. You can go on Wikipedia yourself if you want to read all the rest of the names. So, John, as if I didn't know, why did you choose this particular movie that you wanted to talk about?
So, as we know, Night of the Living Dead, the greatest of all time. It is the blueprint for zombie movies. However, this one had such a great soundtrack to it. I definitely heard the soundtrack before I saw the movie. It's a little more punk rock, it's a little more down and dirty than the other zombie movies that were kind of coming out in that era, in those different kinds of genres. Like this one was like very much like, these are shitty punk rock kids and they're getting into trouble and they happen upon seemingly the end of the world. The poster is one of the coolest, like bar none. Like if you're talking about a movie poster, like to me, like there's, I probably have 10 I could go through to be like, yeah, it's just undeniably cool. And this is one of them. They're back from the grave and ready to party. And, it's just such a cool, it could have been like a Cramps album cover or something, but it's a movie poster. It's one of those movies where like, I think they finally, even though like Night of the Living Dead took place, it was like what, 68? And even like, you've got Dawn of the Dead. I think Day of the Dead came out, I think the same year as this or right directly after. But like, while you have Romero doing a lot of poignant social commentary through his movies and his portrayal of the zombie. I feel like Return of the Living Dead was when they finally really figured out how the zombie works and, what it really is to have essentially almost a nigh unstoppable killing machine, but a lot of them swarming you at all times.
Yes, Night of the Living Dead was 68. Dawn of the Dead is 78. And this movie, folks, if you don't know, it is a sequel to Night of the Living Dead, but it sort of creates an alternate timeline. John Russo and George A. Romero worked on Night of the Living Dead together, and then they parted ways, and they kind of split up the rights. So John Russo got the rights to the Living Dead term, and Romero went off and made movies that just had dead in the title. So he did Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and then years later started doing remakes of those and sequels to the remakes and remakes of the sequels and what have you. And there are a total of 5 movies in this Living Dead series. Some of them were like
it's
sci-fi original.
Like, some would say it goes off the rails immediately in Return of the Living Dead Part 2. It kind of becomes more comedic in a lot of ways. And then in Return of the Living Dead Part 3, it's an overcorrection and trying to really make it, more horror and body horror and sinister style horror. And then like 4 and 5 were just like, well, we're Sci-Fi Channel and we've got a budget. Rave to the grave,
and
y'all.
I think those two were made like at the same time or one right after the other. They were certainly released pretty close to each other. Well, this one is also fairly comical, certainly more comedic than Night of the Living Dead. Just so the thing that strikes me about this movie is just how irresponsible the adults are.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of teenagers in it, but there's also these adults who should have acted more decisively sooner when they mess up.
Or just the
try
fact
to
that
cover it up.
Yeah. Because, I grew up in the 80s. There was always that, boorish older man in the neighborhood who kind of, knew everything and had to let you know how to, live your life and to do the things you were going to do. So, of course, he's going to be middle management wherever he is. And so, in this movie, Burt, Clu Gulager was that guy. And he takes Tom Matthews' Freddie under his wing. Freddie's waiting for all his punk rock friends. It's the 3rd of July. They're waiting to get out and go party in the graveyard. And he's like, essentially he's like, well, the military did this, that, the other thing. Hey, kid, want to see a dead body? And instead of being like the adults in the room, he takes him down to the basement and they accidentally unleash the trioxin, or I don't even think they call it trioxin at this point, which starts the zombie.
2,4,5-trioxin is what it's called.
Yeah, and, makes all the classic mistakes. Oh my God, we're going to get in trouble. So they don't call the cops. They don't call, I think they try to call the military, the phone, they break the phone. It's a comedy of errors, but instead of just every chance they have to kind of go in the right direction, they go in the opposite direction. So, it's
But even before that, the military is messed up. So these guys work in some kind of a medical cadaver supply company. And years ago, the military messed up and sent some bodies to them that they shouldn't have and seem to have lost track of them. Because there's the colonel who his job seems to be to just wait around for somebody to report that they found one of these things.
Yeah, he's just chilling out drinking.
There's this gas that is the trioxin, which is based on Agent Orange from real life, ladies and gentlemen. And I guess they were testing it, or some people got exposed to it, and they locked them up in these canisters because I suppose they couldn't kill them, and then sent them to the wrong place. So they've been sitting in the basement of this warehouse forever until these clowns mess up and break the seal and breathe in the gas. And then when they burn the bodies, this doesn't destroy the problem. It just spreads it. The smoke spreads it further. So it's just, it's government incompetence, authority. It's a very punk movie. It's not just the soundtrack, but the whole idea that you can't trust adults, the authorities are incompetent, I think is a very punk idea. Don't trust anybody over 30.
Yeah, I mean, all the dialogue of the punks, you got Suicide be like, you think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life. Really just sound. And now, mind you, in the world we live in now, I mean, I would even say since like the mid late '80s, you've always had like people who were in their like early 20s playing teenagers, but they looked convincingly young, like they're playing teenagers. Like
Mhm.
these people who were playing the punk rockers in this movie, except for like Linnea Quigley, all of them look like, yeah, we're in our mid 20s and we're playing teenagers, but really we look like we're in our mid 20s. Maybe this guy is 30. I don't know, but like you know they you know they do a lot of telegraphing in the movie, which I appreciate, like Trash, Linnea Quigley talking about how thinking about all the horrible ways to die. For me, the worst thing would be having a bunch of old men get together, biting me and eating me alive, and then wouldn't you know, 20 minutes later.
Yeah, yeah. She, by the way, folks, she gets very naked in this movie because it's an 80s movie. It's an 80s horror movie, so we get some extremely gratuitous nudity. Not that I'm complaining, just
But
pointing it out in case
it's
you're
funny though, because like
planning to watch it.
She gets bitten up by a lot of zombies, so you think, okay, she reanimates, she's gonna be all jacked up. No, she's like still kind of like super hot, has some kind of like prosthetic makeup on her face, buck naked and stark white. So like,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
not a scratch to be seen on her. So that was definitely like
Yeah.
the most easy death you could possibly hope for.
So the some spoilers now, folks, if you haven't watched this already. They eventually call the number on the side of the canister to report the situation to the government. And the government solution is to immediately drop a nuclear bomb on the town,
Yeah.
which I'm not saying is the wrong solution, but it is rather extreme. Although then it turns out to be the wrong solution because it's implied at the very end that they just end up spreading things further.
Further.
Just
Yeah.
like burning the corpse didn't work the first time. Now they've just spread the toxin further rather than destroying it.
Yeah,
So,
it's such a cool movie because so many iconic things happen in this movie that like the brains thing, the brains thing being clear as day, like the zombie telling you that it hurts, being dead hurts.
yeah. That's
Like
somehow eating the brains because they start interrogating one of the zombies. We also have relatively intelligent zombies in this one because they don't only say brains, they can say other things and they set traps and things.
send more
But yeah,
paramedics.
they interrogate this zombie and she says, I want brains. And they're like, why? What did she say? To ease the pain? To help with the pain?
Something like that, yeah.
Somehow eating the brains is going to ease the pain of being dead because just being dead hurts. So that's a new thing. You don't normally see the zombies really feeling anything, but just being zombies is causing them pain. I quite liked that. The effects are all very practical because it's the 80s, and I think they're pretty good.
You know what? They're not bad. All practical effects, like when they drop the bombs, like it's models, like it's definitely an interesting movie. It's definitely like a very like stark contrast between this and Dawn of the Dead. I just actually went to the Alamo Drafthouse maybe 2 months ago ish to see the 45th anniversary screening of Dawn of the Dead. And for those who may not be familiar with the Alamo Drafthouse, it's a super cool movie theater that shows a lot of old movies, and they will bring you food to your seat. So I had a burger, which kind of a weird flex, eating a burger, watching people eat people. But, I digress. But I had dinner and I watched Dawn of the Dead. And, like, watching what Romero's idea of what a zombie is and the emotion and the kind of muscle memory of a zombie, like, walking around the mall constantly versus, like, the unmitigated hunger that came from Return of the Living Dead, where now you know what their purpose is and why they're trying to eat and feed. It's just because they're just, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like, an addict trying to satiate that black hole that'll never get filled. And they're constantly just trying to keep taking a hit of brain and try to kind of level themselves out, but it'll never come, and it's sad, but also very like makes complete sense.
Yeah, they're definitely two very different views of zombies. And in fact, in the beginning of this film, Bert tells us that movie, he mentions that movie, Night of the Living Dead, is based on a true story, but the government made them change things. So that's how it acknowledges the existence of the movie it's kind of a sequel to, but also makes an excuse for why, but we're going to change things and it's not going to work the way it did in that movie, because that movie's only based on a true story, but it's not absolute.
Which is
They made changes.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
a meta way to acknowledge all of that. And also kind of like,
Yeah.
I was there, I was in on that, but I can't talk about that. Now it's like, Grandpa George went this way, I went this way, and,
It is a clever way of acknowledging where it came from, but then saying, but I'm going to do it differently.
Yeah, for sure.
So now I'm not sure, though, that any of these feel any great obligation to any sort of strict continuity. I think all of these movies have a tendency to just make little tweaks if they feel like it and not worry about if it contradicts anything.
Well, but this is also back at a time when, like, the idea of continuous, it wasn't like it is today, where when you make a movie, they're like, okay, we're going to make a movie, and we're planning to make X amount of sequels, and the first movie has not even hit the theater yet. We don't know if it's going to be a hit. We don't know if it's going to make money, but we know that if we are going to tell this story, we have to also be ready to tell these other sequels. And they kind of like build the world out and make a Bible for it, and they run it like it is set in stone that they're going to tell this whole overarching story. Whereas like back in the 80s and like even in the early 90s, it was like, yeah, there's sequels, but it was just kind of like, well, he kind of like pops up again, and maybe if we get to like the fourth one, we'll try to like, retcon some stuff and move some stuff around so you can actually like get a cohesive story. Like, I mean, if you look at like, and forgive me, I always mix them up because after you come back to a series where your third movie has nothing to do with it whatsoever outside of being called Halloween 3.
Yeah.
I forget if it was the fourth one or the fifth one where they introduced like the Cult of Thorn to Michael Myers.
Mhm.
And suddenly there's all this like
Right.
war and like something, so there's a mysterious invisible hand pulling the strings and then they're like, yeah, now we forget it. We're just, by the next movie, we're like, yeah, we tried.
Yeah.
But it's like, the trioxin thing, the government folly was a thing. In 2, they figured out electricity really messes up the zombies too. You can kill a zombie with electricity. And that carried over for at least 2 and 3. But yeah, it's all loose, man. It's all loose. In fact, like, it's so loose that, and this is the first time I've ever like seen this up until that time, I'd never seen this before, but like you have Clu Gulager as Bert and Tom Matthews as Freddy in Return of the Living Dead, but then both of those dudes pop up again playing different characters in Return of the Living Dead 2. In Return of the Living Dead 2, they're grave robbers, and you just don't acknowledge it.
Right.
Because people really liked them the first time. It's like, we'll bring them back. We'll just make different characters who also suffer like terrible fates.
Right. Yeah, I don't think I realized that because I haven't rewatched that one yet, and it's been a long time since I've seen it. I do know for our patrons, we recently recorded a Rocky Horror Picture Show, and we're going to do Shock Treatment. And in Shock Treatment, you get some actors that come back playing different parts, and then you have some different actors playing the same parts, and 2 actors who are actually in the first movie playing the same parts in the second movie. So that one gets a little complicated.
It's dicey.
Well, John, we're going to rate our movies this year on a 5-point scale as always, but this year it's 1 to 5 brains. So how many brains are you going to rate Return of the Living Dead?
Sergeant and Mr. Smith, you're going to love this house.
Bunk beds in a closet?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
Immerse yourself in Candy Crush Music Season. Crush the competition for a chance to win 3 epic live music experiences anywhere in the world. Discover the hottest new tracks from Toki Monsta, Kimbra, and Lazewo in-game now. Now that sounds sweet. Click or tap the banner to download Candy Crush and play Music Season now. Start September 19th. Open to players 18 older above level 25 in eligible countries. Price cap value and terms apply.
Oh, 5. It gets 5 brains. Yeah.
Okay.
Without
5.
hesitation, it is one of, if not the best zombie movie ever made.
Okay. I think I'm just going to give it 4 because I don't want to give it away, but there is, I'll tell you after we're off the air. There is another one that I like that is my personal favorite that we will be reviewing later in the season in our 31 Days of the Dead. And I'm saving my 5 for that one. Some of the others might get 5s along the way. But I'm going to give it a 4. I like it, but it's not my very favorite. But it's good. It's good. Well, thanks so much for joining me, John Hambone McGuire.
My pleasure.
Folks, check out his game. Check out his other games. We'll put links to all that stuff in our show notes. Until next time, which will be tomorrow, I've been Precious D. Thank you all for listening. Remember to keep calm and take shelter in basements. Please don't misuse science. We won't see you, but you will hear us next time on Monster Movie Fun Time Go. You've been listening to Monster Movie Fun Time Go. If you enjoyed the show, please consider rating and reviewing us on your podcasting platform of choice. You can leave us a message and find links to all our things at mmftg.com.